Gothic literature is one of the most atmospheric and psychologically resonant genres in English literature. First emerging in the late 18th century, Gothic novels are characterized by their use of the supernatural, emotional extremes, and dark, brooding settings. At their core, they explore human fears, taboos, and the unknown, often cloaked in mystery and terror. The appeal of the Gothic mode lies in its ability to reflect cultural anxieties through eerie landscapes, haunted characters, and emotional intensity. It gives voice to repressed fears, critiques societal norms, and presents the world as a complex interplay of light and shadow, reason, and madness. This video traces the evolution of the Gothic novel from its origins in 18th century England to its influence in contemporary media. We explore its defining features, key authors and texts, and its transformation across literary periods. Along the way, we also examine the Gothic's adaptability and relevance to modern audiences.
Origins of the Gothic novel.
Historical and cultural context of 18th century England.
The Gothic novel emerged during a time of intense cultural transition. The Enlightenment emphasized reason, science, and rationality, yet by the late 1700s, the limits of these ideals began to show. A counter-movement, Romanticism, emphasized emotion, nature, and the sublime. Against this backdrop of rational progress and growing unease, the Gothic novel was born, articulating fears that reason could not contain.
Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, 1764, the first Gothic novel.
Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto is widely regarded as the first Gothic novel. Subtitled A Gothic Story, it introduced many key elements of the genre. A gloomy castle, a mysterious prophecy, supernatural apparitions, and noble characters haunted by fate and ancestral guilt. It fused medievalism with a heightened sense of drama and terror, laying the groundwork for future Gothic fiction.
Architectural symbolism and medievalism.
Architecture plays a crucial role in Gothic literature. The decaying castle in Walpole's novel symbolizes moral decay and ancestral sin. Ruins, underground passages, and hidden chambers create a physical space where forbidden secrets and repressed desires can be uncovered. The medieval setting, with its associations of superstition and feudal tyranny, stood in contrast to Enlightenment ideals.
Supernatural as metaphor for political social anxiety.
The supernatural in early Gothic fiction often acts as a metaphor for larger cultural tensions, such as fears of revolution, loss of identity, or class upheaval. The ghost or curse becomes a narrative device that externalizes psychological or historical trauma.
Influence of the Enlightenment and Romanticism.
Though seemingly opposed to Enlightenment values, Gothic literature was born from it. The Gothic novel often features rational characters who are confronted with irrational forces, testing the limits of reason. Romanticism's focus on emotion, individual experience, and the sublime further shaped the genre, emphasizing awe, fear, and the sublime power of nature.
Defining features of Gothic literature.
Setting: castles, monasteries, remote locations.
Gothic novels are often set in remote and foreboding locations: abandoned castles, windswept moors, desolate mansions, or shadowy forests. These places are isolated from civilization, creating a sense of vulnerability and dislocation that mirrors the psychological states of the characters.
Atmosphere: mystery, dread, and decay.
Atmosphere is essential to the Gothic experience. From the first page, readers are immersed in a world of suspense and dread. The decay of buildings often parallels moral or emotional decay, and the looming presence of death permeates the narrative.
Characters: the Byronic hero, the innocent heroine, tyrannical villains.
Gothic fiction features a cast of archetypal characters. The Byronic hero, a brooding, rebellious, and tormented male figure inspired by Lord Byron's poetry. The innocent heroine, often a young woman threatened by male authority or supernatural forces. The tyrannical villain, a cruel figure of power, often a patriarch, who seeks to control others.
Themes in Gothic literature.
Fear of the unknown. The Gothic explores uncharted psychological and spiritual terrain. Transgression and punishment. Characters who break moral or social codes are often punished, highlighting societal fears around desire and rebellion. And madness and the unconscious. Delirium, hallucinations, and fragmented identities express inner turmoil. Death, decay, and the sublime. Nature, death, and the infinite are rendered both terrifying and beautiful. Use of the supernatural and psychological horror. Ghosts, monsters, and curses blur the boundary between reality and imagination, often revealing deeper psychological truths.
Anne Radcliffe, The Mysteries of Udolpho.
Radcliffe is often considered the queen of the Gothic novel. Her novels, particularly The Mysteries of Udolpho, 1794, refine the genre by focusing on psychological suspense and moral themes. She introduced the technique of explained supernatural, where seemingly magical events are given rational explanations, thus grounding terror in realism while preserving mystery.
Matthew Lewis, The Monk.
In contrast, Lewis's The Monk, 1796, embraced Gothic excess. With themes of lust, corruption, and satanic temptation, it shocked contemporary readers. The novel's sensationalism, graphic content, and unflinching portrayal of moral decay exemplify the Gothic's power to confront taboos.
Mary Shelley, Frankenstein.
Published in 1818, Frankenstein remains a foundational Gothic text. Shelley merged science fiction with Gothic horror, creating a story that interrogates the limits of human knowledge and the consequences of playing God. The creature, both monstrous and tragic, reflects the genre's interest in the other and the alienated self.
Charles Maturin, Melmoth the Wanderer.
Maturin's novel, 1820, follows a man who sells his soul for extended life and wanders the world in search of someone to take his place. Drawing on Faustian legend, the book examines existential despair and spiritual damnation, pushing Gothic tropes into metaphysical and philosophical realms.
Transition from medieval Gothic to urban Gothic.
By the mid-19th century, the Gothic moved from medieval ruins to modern cities. The horrors of industrialization, urban crime, and shifting gender roles found expression in more psychological and domestic forms of Gothic fiction.
Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre.
Though often classified as a romantic novel, Jane Eyre contains strong Gothic elements. The mysterious Thornfield Hall, the madwoman in the attic, and themes of isolation and identity. The novel uses Gothic motifs to explore feminine independence and repressed trauma.
Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights blends Gothic setting with emotional extremity. The haunting moors, ghostly visitations, and obsessive love between Heathcliff and Catherine create a story steeped in Gothic intensity and psychological complexity.
Bram Stoker, Dracula.
Perhaps the most iconic Gothic novel, Dracula, 1897, reflects Victorian anxieties around sexuality, immigration, disease, and the collapse of rational order. The vampire, both seductive and repulsive, embodies fears of contamination and the foreign other.
Robert Louis Stevenson, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
This novella explores the duality of human nature. Dr. Jekyll's transformation into Mr. Hyde represents the unleashing of repressed desires and the darkness lurking within the civilized self. The story reflects urban Gothic concerns with identity and moral corruption.
Adaptation of Gothic tropes in American literature.
The Gothic mode traveled to America, where it was adapted to local landscapes and cultural anxieties, especially around religion, slavery, and psychological repression.
Nathaniel Hawthorne, The House of the Seven Gables.
Hawthorne's works often explore ancestral guilt and moral ambiguity. In The House of the Seven Gables, the past literally haunts the present, symbolizing the psychological legacy of sin and shame in Puritan society.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Poe's stories, such as The Fall of the House of Usher and The Telltale Heart, focus on madness, guilt, and unreliable narrators. His intense psychological horror and poetic language made him a master of the American Gothic.
Southern Gothic. Faulkner Flannery O'Connor.
Southern Gothic literature, developed in the 20th century, focuses on decay, grotesque characters, and moral disintegration in the American South. William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily and O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find use Gothic elements to explore race, religion, and human cruelty.
The Gothic in 20th and 21st century literature.
The Gothic continues to evolve in modern fiction, embracing themes of alienation, technology, and trauma.
Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House.
Jackson's novel is a landmark in psychological horror. The haunted house becomes a mirror for the protagonist's mind, blurring the line between supernatural and psychological breakdown.
Daphne du Maurier, Rebecca.
With its eerie mansion, Manderley, and the ghostly presence of a dead wife, Rebecca revitalizes the Gothic romance. Themes of identity, jealousy, and memory dominate.
Neo-Gothic in postmodern literature. Angela Carter, Sarah Waters.
Carter's The Bloody Chamber reimagines fairy tales with feminist and Gothic sensibilities. Sarah Waters, in novels like Affinity and The Little Stranger, blends historical fiction with supernatural suspense and queer themes.
Contemporary horror and media.
Gothic tropes are central to modern horror novels, films, and series, such as The Others, Crimson Peak, The Babadook, and Penny Dreadful. These works revisit the Gothic to address contemporary fears, from domestic abuse to mental illness.
Feminist readings of Gothic literature.
Feminist critics have long explored how Gothic fiction represents female agency, repression, and trauma. The mad woman in the attic trope, for instance, symbolizes the silencing of women's voices. Modern Gothic heroines challenge and redefine this tradition.
Post-colonial and queer Gothic.
The Gothic has also been reinterpreted through post-colonial and queer lenses. Themes of otherness, displacement, and marginalization make it a powerful mode for exploring colonial guilt or queer identity in a hostile world.
The Gothic in film, TV, and video games.
From Psycho to The Haunting of Bly Manor, the Gothic continues to shape visual storytelling. Games like Resident Evil and Bloodborne draw on Gothic architecture, atmosphere, and themes to create immersive experiences.
Gothic architecture and its revival.
Gothic architecture itself, pointed arches, vaulted ceilings, gargoyles, was revived in the 19th century as part of the Gothic revival. It influenced not only literature, but art, design, and national identity, especially in Britain.
Continued cultural relevance.
The Gothic endures because it adapts. It reflects current anxieties, be they scientific, environmental, or political, while drawing on timeless fears. Its aesthetic of beauty and terror continues to captivate readers and creators alike. From its roots in 18th century England to its presence in contemporary media, the Gothic novel has remained a potent literary force. It has evolved from tales of haunted castles to stories of psychological terror, urban alienation, and social critique. Gothic fiction endures because it dares to explore the forbidden and confront the unknown. It asks difficult questions about identity, desire, morality, and the boundaries of human experience. As long as we wrestle with fear and wonder, the Gothic will remain a vital part of literature and culture.